Hello everyone and welcome back guys to episode 4 of season 3 of our F1 2020 My Team career mode, where today we're here back ready for the Chinese Grand Prix. Now obviously if you missed out on the last video from Vietnam, I would definitely recommend going back and checking that video out. Well, so far all 3 races to kick off season 3 have been very interesting in their own ways. Obviously I won't leave any spoilers in 3, 2, 1... And now then, having a look at the championship order, George Russell leads the way 11 points ahead of ourselves as we head into round 4, sorry, I should say, of the season. We've got a 21-point gap over Esteban Ocon, who's had a fantastic start to the season, comfortably there in P3 ahead of Danny Rick and Carlos Sainz there. We were at 125 points in the Constructors' Championship. Toretto's 38. Yeah, this is quite possibly the most dominant start to a Formula 1 season that any team has ever seen. But as we head into Shanghai this weekend, don't think we need to worry about changing any parts, any components on the car either. No, everything still not too badly worn. We've got a couple more upgrades in the works. We've got the final 2 power upgrades on the car. Hopefully those will be coming in the near future. No chassis upgrades at the moment. Hopefully we can get one this weekend, and then no aero upgrades as well. So we'll see if we can try and get a chassis upgrade on. The best way to do that is by diving into free practice. Into free practice then, the eagle eye among you might have just noticed we are actually running with our Formula rim again on F1 2020. Now, it appears to be working today. We'll see how long it lasts. Yeah, you'll probably notice at some point halfway through the race that I'll end up jump cutting to one of my circular rims again here. But free practice, we've got the qualifying not the qualifying simulation run, the R&D track acclimatization lap's done. Coming to the end of free practice then, just doing our qualifying simulation run at the moment. I'll be honest, if you guys watched the Red Bull Cult career mode video that went live finally yesterday with Jamie183, definitely a good video. I'd recommend going back and checking that one out. Yeah, we've been struggling around this track for pace. It's not a track that particularly suits me, but saying that, we're going to run a 28.9 at the end of the practice program there, which is going to give us the purple score. Let's get back to the garage. So, free practice done and dusted then, and despite actually not being able to complete all the programs to the best of our ability, it's still 1100 R&D points between myself and George. We desperately want to try and get our combined team acclaim level up to 20 as well at the moment, but 1600 R&D points I don't think is quite enough for any more upgrades. Yeah, so unfortunately we don't quite have enough R&D points to go for another upgrade unless it is on the durability side of things, which I don't really want to have to do at the moment here. So let's dive in then for qualifying for round 4 of the season here from Shanghai. Heading out into Q2 then, we're going to see what's possible on a set of the medium compounded tyres. The delta is rather large between the mediums and the softs around Shanghai, but the softs just never really are able to go any sort of distance in the race trim here. So we'll see what we can do in Q2. If we can get through into Q3 on these mediums, then that will certainly be rather ideal for the rest of our weekend, because the 1 and the 2 stop strategies really are very different around this track, unless of course we get a safety car, which based on so far the season is fairly likely as well. Coming towards the end of our lap then, we're going to be aiming for a sort of a mid to high 28, a little bit of wheel spin as we head out of the final corner. Gasly's done a 29.2 through the final turn, use all of the curbing on the exit. It's going to be a 29.0. That puts us dangerously on the cusp as Sainz goes even faster. Just under 6 minutes left on the clock. We're down to P11, so obviously we're going to have to go for another run here. Definitely felt like had we got it absolutely nailed, we could have been close to at least the cusp at the moment. But obviously people might go quicker. We got a nice clean track though. The game reckons these softs here 1.5 seconds a lap faster than the mediums. So I think it overestimates the gaps just a little bit around Shanghai, but hopefully, yeah, we should be able to get a good lap in about probably upwards of a second quicker. That should safely see us into Q3, as we should be getting every single race. That might make things spicy. The rain in 10 minutes, according to Jeff, so we might get a bit of a drizzly Q3. So yeah, George in Q2 I think is currently top with like a 27.9 to 27.8. So we should be around that as we head out of the final corner. See if we can try and sneak into the 27s. A lot of curb through the final corner, but we don't run wide on the exit. It's going to be a 27.7. Fastest in Q2. Happy with that. So there we go then, the end of Q2. Quicker than George by a 1/10 of a second there. Rather happy with that one, as once again Mercedes and Ferrari seem to be a little bit closer to us this weekend there. Daniel Ricciardo, Pierre Gasly and both McLarens making it through into Q3, so a little bit different to what we've seen over the last couple of races there. I'm sure both Albon and Ocon gutted not to make it into Q3. But anyway, the chance of some mixed up conditions here. Let's see what's possible in the final qualifying session here in Shanghai. So, getting ready then for our first Q3 run. There's definitely a little bit of drizzle out, as you can quite clearly see on the screens. The team have said it should be coming to an end rather quickly here in qualifying, so it might be one of those qualifying sessions where you've got to be the last car going on to your lap. There is definitely not the same amount of grip we saw in Q2, however, as we were massively wide out of the final corner to start our run. Let's see what our first lap, if we can get a fairly decent banker in. Track doesn't feel like it's lost too much, actually. Perhaps we just weren't able to get the tyres up to temperature through the final corner. We might just need to be down a couple of extra gears in a few places, just as JD would say, for that extra rotation into the corners. But through the first sector, fairly nice and tidy. We're just going to brake a little bit early here. I know how easy it is to snag the brakes. We've just spent all the free practice doing that, as we try to get the power down on the exit. Just a tiny bit of slip from the rear wheels. A big blend as we head through the S's here. Yeah, definitely don't quite have the grip in the higher speed sections of the track. Oh, definitely don't want first gear there, as the back end, not a fan of that one. And that's going to completely ruin our first lap. It appears that the team have got the call wrong then in Q3. We'd headed back out onto the track, but it's just getting wetter and wetter. And despite the fact, look, we got nothing into the final corner, time's up as well here in qualifying for the Chinese Grand Prix. So a crazy mixed up grid then. We start all the way down in P10. That's not what we wanted at the end of qualifying.
Time to remind ourselves of our top three: Leclerc, Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas. Well, that wraps up qualifying, but don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow as we head into the Grand Prix.
So there we go then, Charles Leclerc on pole for the Chinese Grand Prix there. The first non-2-2 Motorsport pole position of the year there. Verstappen in P2. Bottas in third, so that's the first non-2-2 Motorsport car, I think, to start from pole since the Brazilian Grand Prix last year. If I remember correctly, Bottas actually started from pole. George got a penalty. But yeah, really mixed up grid then. Pierre Gasly up in P5 ahead of Ricciardo with both McLarens. Then Lewis Hamilton down in P9, the slowest man even in Q3. And yeah, we didn't even get a lap in the end after we stacked it on our first run. So actually it wasn't a case of being the last car out there. It was Charles Leclerc who went out straight away, who finds himself on pole position then. So a bit of a mixed up grid towards the front. Let's see if we can carve our way through the traffic and still get a good result.
It's time to find out which driver is up to the task of claiming the Chinese Grand Prix. We're here in Shanghai. Shanghai International Circuit then, a 16-corner high-speed thrill ride. The long and ever-tightening right-hander at turns 1 and 2 tests a driver's patience, and the flat, open to the elements location, tests their skill in a crosswind. 2 DRS zones will assist passing, and overtaking is available into turn 1, and of course down the kilometre-long back straight into the hairpin at turn 14. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. Charles Leclerc lines up on pole position, and Max Verstappen lines up alongside. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Bottas, Russell, Pierre Gasly and Ricciardo, Norris, Sainz, Hamilton and Mr. Monaco, Perez, Albon, Daniel Kvyat and Ocon, Raikkonen, Stroll, Nobuharu Matsushita and Jordan King, Magnussen, De Vries, Giovinazzi and Nicholas Latifi. And now it's time to head down to the track
that we've got some points on the board, let's continue this form and aim for another top 10 finish.
So here we are then on the grid, ready for round 4 of the season from Shanghai. We need to outscore George Russell again this weekend, but it will be interesting to see whether either of our cars can fight their way back up from the mid-pack here. Obviously, George Russell only starting on the second row. He shouldn't have too difficult time of it if he can get through at the start. But in the perfect world, we'll get close to George before he can get close to the rest of the runners here. Now, I'm gutted because we went out in Q3. No, obviously we qualified. Don't worry about that. I forgot how Q2 works in Formula 1 there. But we're going to try, yeah, we may as well just stick with the soft, medium strategy here. We never really need any spare fuel as well, obviously. We'll wait and see if we get a safety car, how that'll affect us as well this weekend. But yeah, we need to get through turn 1 in one piece and see if we can make up any places as well. We're ready on the grid for round 4 of the season here from Shanghai. A crazy qualifying session, mixed up the grid, but it's 5 red lights. And it's lights out, and away we go, off to a mess start, we'll call it. Not particularly good, but not particularly bad. We don't gain anything into turn 1 as Albon almost going for the suicidal lunge into the first corner. As always, we'll have a look to the outside, see if there's a couple of places to be made, and as always, there's at least one to be had. 7-time Formula 1 World Champion Hamilton disposed of, and fellow Brit Lando Norris as well as we head out the first couple of corners. Lando's going to try coming back at us, but yeah, we've got a bit of a stronger car at the moment. As already George Russell is trying to look past the other Mercedes. Obviously, theoretically, still our biggest rivals in the sport at the moment, but really, after the first 3 Grand Prix, Renault, or Esteban Ocon even I should say, seems to be the only man semi-consistent enough to really be able to battle us, and I don't think he's scored a podium yet either in the early rounds of this season. He might have got 1 actually, saying that, but a good little start for ourselves, straight up into P8, up 2 spots. I can see George has now got past Bottas over to P3. Ferrari, though, are really trying to just romp away at the start of this race. Can we now get a bit of a run on Carlos Sainz as we head out onto the back straight? Obviously, we've got such good top-end speed in this car. We'll be doing nearly 218 miles an hour in qualifying without a toe off anyone else. Up the inside of Sainz, though, before we even get into the corner, I think about trying to Daniel Ricciardo, but it doesn't quite work out this time. Up 3 spots off the start, though, a good little getaway for ourselves. Heading on to the back straight of lap 2, though, hopefully once again we can try and get a run past another car here. We've got Ricciardo and Gasly, obviously both Honda-powered cars, just in front of us, and we are making fairly decent gains on Daniel Ricciardo. That Red Bull, though, not bad at the top end. This time round, though, we'll try to Ricciardo Danny Rick, and this time round, I'm sure, if it wasn't him getting overtaken, he'd be rather impressed with that move. Up into 6th. Pierre Gasly doing very, very well in the early stages of this race in the AlphaTauri, but especially now with the DRS, I don't think there's going to be much he can do to defend himself. Nearly 220 miles an hour as we head down the back straight. He's going to go defensive on us, but once again, we're going to be nice and late on the brakes. He's going to keep the nose there, in all fairness, but way easier on the traction on the exit. We're up into 5th as George now has moved past Charles Leclerc up into 2nd place of this Grand Prix. New fastest lap as well from our teammate. We were only a couple of tenths off. We got one of the Ferraris in, that is Max Verstappen, who was at the lead of this Grand Prix. Gasly behind us as well has just chucked it in to the pits as well. So, we are meant to be pitting rather quickly in this race. I'm intrigued to know whether George is going to dive it in or if he's going to stay out an extra one here. If George doesn't dive it in, we have definitely got to make the call. End of lap 5 then. Are we going to see George Russell diving into the pits at the end of this one? No, he's not. So George is going to stay out another lap here. So are Charles Leclerc and Valtteri Bottas. So we are definitely going to chuck it in. A bit brave on the pit entry. 2007 Hamilton style. It's probably the only way we can describe that, but we do just about get the car slowed down into the pits. Only the McLaren of Carlos Sainz has followed us in this time round, so I'm not too sure why no one else has opted to pit. Hopefully we haven't missed out something glaringly obvious in this Grand Prix. Most of the midfield obviously trying the one stop on their mediums, so we are actually probably in a proper net race battle with these guys, but there goes Verstappen. We should still be ahead of Pierre Gasly. Yes, we are. So one more to go in this race. But now we've got to try and cut through the back markers. Down in P20. Not what I expected at the start of this weekend. Albon, though, at the Grand Prix. Please don't be a safety car now, because that could really cost us. I hadn't even spotted the yellow flags. But there is the Red Bull. Another DNF for the team. Not what they need in their season of rebuilding. He's really, really struggling around in this Haas car at the moment as we head down the back straight, or down the little straightaway even, I should say. Now we're getting ready for the big back straight, and yeah, he's got no grip in comparison to ourselves. Up the inside through the snail section is not a move you see all too often. Verstappen, though, really, really struggling behind one of the Williams. He's now going to try and pull to the outside of Antonio Giovinazzi here. We're going to get the nice double toe as we head down the back straight. We got, who's that? Latifi getting a bit defensive on the pair of them. It's all getting a little bit scrappy. We're going to try and look around the outside of Verstappen, though. A bit of wheel spin, but we've done it on the Ferrari car there. So right around him. Sure, he wasn't quite expecting that one. We need to get a good run here on Giovinazzi and Latifi as well. We got the DRS, and yeah, look at the straight line speed over these guys. And we're going to get round Charles Leclerc as well, I think that was, in the pit. So we're straight back up now into P10 of the Grand Prix. Russell 3.6 up the road. But I think now, after just 7 laps, as a team, we've gone from 4th and 10th to net 1 and 2. Probably where we should be at the moment, but still, we're back roughly in a good race. Now, we need to try and close down our teammate. End of lap 7. We're now at quarter race distance here in the Chinese Grand Prix. New fastest lap of the day is we're now going to try and get past Kevin Magnussen on the run down towards turn 1. We've made another move work. Next up then, on the road, is our teammate George Russell as we run rather deep into turn 1, but just about get the car turned in anyway. Just see up the road there, George Russell now finally making a move on Nobuharu Matsushita there. Russell has lost so much time on this lap. Stuck behind the Japanese driver there. Obviously their car's just nowhere near the same sort of level as our own. But look at that, Matsushita coming back at our teammate George Russell in towards the final couple of corners. Who's going to yield? Neither of them are. As we head through the final turn, we're going to be so much closer to the pair of them. Unfortunately, we haven't got any DRS this time round. We weren't close enough, but it shows ourselves just how much we gained down in through that final corner there. Can we have a look around the outside of Matsushita? No, we can't. And 1 lap ago, I said about how we just avoided the grass. That time round, not so lucky. Credit where credit's due to Matsushita. He's sticking with Stroll and Raikkonen not too badly in this Grand Prix, based on just how much of a weaker car Alfa Romeo have got, but we're still going to be able to fly past him before we even get to the DRS zone. You can see Stroll now trying to look, Stroll trying to defend, actually, I should say, from our teammate George Russell here as we head down the back straight. Is George going to be able to make this move work? He's actually going to try and send it up the inside of Raikkonen as well here. Is he once again going to make it a bit scrappy in through the final corner? No, this time around, Raikkonen, F1's elder statesman, just slots in behind him now as we're going to try and get a run on Lance Stroll in towards the first corner. Are we going to be able to send it? We're just about up the inside. Stroll, I was a little bit worried he wouldn't give us the room there. Can we sneak up the inside of Raikkonen as well? He tries to turn in, but we make the double overtake work, and now George Russell is right in our sights. Heading out onto the back straight at lap 12. It's been nice just to have a couple of laps where it hasn't all been kicking off. Shanghai, as always, seems to be providing a lot of action here, but George really, really struggling to get past Esteban Ocon, obviously the consistency man in the opening 3 rounds of the season. He's our nearest title rival at the moment, so it's critical that we both get past the Renault. Seems a little bit ridiculous saying that when I say it out loud, but hey-ho. But yeah, anyway, at the final couple of corners, though, is George going to be able to get a run this time on the Renault? I don't think he has. Ocon has just got enough top-end speed. That means Russell can't quite get to him at the moment, so we are going to try and fill our teammates' mirrors here as we head through turn 2. We get the grip round the outside, not too sure how we've managed that, and I said about filling our teammates' mirrors, a huge dump truck of wheel spin on the exit. We almost pulled that off accidentally. Heading through the final couple of corners then of lap 13, the leader has dived it into the pits as well as P2 and P3 here, so now George Russell and myself are going to be back up into the lead of this Grand Prix here, so now we can't afford to let George start to bolt away again after being able to apply so much pressure on those last couple of laps here. We need to try and slipstream, potentially DRS pass him in this Grand Prix. What we desperately need, you know, this is as much an on-track battle as psychological, just like what we used to see between Hamilton and Rosberg. What we need is just a dominant Grand Prix weekend. George obviously had Australia and then really Bahrain as well, that were dominant displays. Well, Bahrain wasn't quite the same way, but it was still a huge psychological blow for myself here. But yeah, we need to try and get one race like that. Obviously, Vietnam kind of felt like our payback for Bahrain Now we need a race a bit more like Australia, but if the first half is anything to go by, not going to be that plain sailing. George now finding a bit of extra grip in his medium compounded tyres. We're going to have to try and go for a bit of an undercut on him when we get to the next round of stops, which should only be a couple of laps from now. Last couple of laps, though, George Russell has absolutely romped away from us in this race. He's just taken a few tenths out of us lap after lap here. End of 16, we're going to have to pit in at the end of this one. I just don't think these mediums have got much more left in them, and we're just throwing away time at this stage of the day. However, very, very worried we're going to lose a lot of time in the traffic. George, though, he's going to pit in, which is not what we needed in this race. It might help us out in the long run, though, if he does get held up in traffic, but we were planning on coming in at the end of that one. So George, he pit later than us in the first stint, but clearly he's struggling on his mediums as well then. So I'm intrigued to know, is he going to go on to hards to the end of the Grand Prix? I wouldn't have thought so in this race. No, George stays on another set of mediums by the looks of it. So now we've really got to push. Is he going to get held up in traffic? He might just get held up behind the Red Bull, as we've actually got a Haas a couple of seconds up the road. Not often do we lap cars in this series, just with the nature of the 50% races, so that might be a little bit of a memorable moment for us. Certainly a moment to forget, however, for whichever Haas it is. I'm going to guess it's De Vries. He seems to have been struggling all weekend. End of lap 17. It has, though, meant, obviously with George Russell pitting in that lap earlier, that we've now done most of the heavy work on this set of the mediums, so we can enjoy the last set just a little bit more. Very, very aggressive on our way into the pit lane. Get it slowed down nice and tidily that time round. Has Russell lost any time behind Ricciardo? I don't really think so in this race. Bottas is going to inherit the lead. I think that's about the 5th or 6th different race leader we've had so far today. We're definitely not going to be out ahead of our teammate George Russell. But how much time have we lost to him? A nice 2.2 second stop. We haven't really lost much to our teammate, but we're really going to have to try and push like crazy if we want to close back up to him. We've lost about a second by the looks of it. Let's get our head down and focus. Absolutely critical that we get in the DRS of Daniel Ricciardo on this lap and try to get past him as we head in towards the final 10 of this Grand Prix. The gap to George has stayed fairly even so far this lap as we've got the tyres up to temperature. We should gain a bit in the DRS of Ricciardo, who's going to go defensive on us. We've already mugged him off once this race. Once again, we're going to beat the Australian on the brakes. He is going to keep the nose there, but we should be able to out-traction him, which we've done. Next up then, George Russell. Can we just take a few tenths out of him lap after lap here? George sets a 30.5 fastest lap though. We did, however, take a lot of time out of him, so maybe there's a bit more pace still in the car. End of lap 20, both myself and Valtteri Bottas have taken a lot of time. Both myself and George Russell even, I should say, taking a lot of time out of Valtteri Bottas as we head into the final quarter of this Grand Prix. But if Bottas can keep Russell at bay this lap, it might just give us a bit of a fighting chance against our teammate at the end of this Grand Prix here. You can see George now sat all over the rear wing of that Mercedes, but we're taking time now out of the pair of them. We can't afford to make mistakes of our own though, as we almost snagged the brakes in through that final corner of Sector 1 through the hairpin, but you can just see the delta is coming down. It's back under 2 seconds to our teammate George here. It just is hovering around that mark at the moment. He will be able to get round him down at the back straight, unless of course he makes a mistake, which I can't see happening from our teammate George Russell at this stage of the season. Down in through the chicane, taking a lot of curb on the way in. Try to avoid the curbs on the way out. Make sure we get on the ERS as early as we can and just boosting all the way down this straight, trying to find any time we can. Is Valtteri Bottas going to play defensive on our teammate George Russell, or are we going to see our teammate duck to the inside? Yes, Bottas, very, very defensive there in towards the final corners of the lap. Is George going to be able to get the run though up the inside, or are we going to see Bottas diving in to the pits? No, Bottas stays out, but George has pulled the move off and now moves himself back up into the lead of the Grand Prix. How long is Bottas planning on trying to take those hard compound tyres in this race? Is he trying to go to the end with some sort of miracle strategy run? I'm not too sure at the moment, but Russell's now past him with some clear air. We need to get past the Mercedes as well then, as quickly as possible. Lap 22 as we head out onto the back straight. We should be close enough to get a run on Valtteri Bottas here. Just boosting again, using the ERS so early out of that corner here. We do need to try and get past him nice and cleanly as we head down this back straight, gaining so much time on the Mercedes. He's going to go defensive on us, but nowhere near defensive enough as we head into the hairpin. Hopefully a nice textbook move, trying to throw away as little time for ourselves as possible at the final corner. The gap to George still just under 2 seconds, so we certainly haven't lost as much time through getting around Bottas as our teammate did. But still, 5 or 6 laps to go here. Bottas is staying out for another one. So I don't know if he's trying to get some softs to the end, or yeah, like I said, trying to just stretch those hard compounded tyres. Can we, however, close up the gap to our teammate? There we go, George Russell getting round Kevin Magnussen. Oh, I don't even know if it's K-Max, or it might be still Nick de Vries in this Grand Prix. It is Nick de Vries. So yeah, Nick's still really struggling this weekend. But I think we are starting to head the same way as well. I was always a bit conscious that these tyres would probably start to fall off again, like we saw them do in the first stint. Hopefully we can try and get past de Vries at least at the final, penultimate corner even, I should say. But yeah, we're just struggling now to match George Russell in the final few laps of this Grand Prix, unless, of course, we can perform a miracle. That is not going to help us. Yellow flags out as the Haas. There's a safety car. The Haas suddenly blew up just behind us after we got round him there, so we have now got a safety car in this Grand Prix. How is that going to change things with just 3 laps to go here from Shanghai? You know what, we're going to gamble it here in this Chinese Grand Prix. We're going to come in onto a fresh set, or a fairly new set of these soft compounded tyres, and try to make this last to the flag. We're going to definitely drop behind Bottas. I'm praying that we stay out ahead of Daniel Ricciardo in this Grand Prix. Nice and slow, very close to speeding in the pit lane this time round. If we stay out ahead of Danny Rick, then we might be good. If we get stuck behind him, however, that might be our race strategy out the window. I think it's going to happen here. This is not what we need. We need to definitely be ahead of Perez, so we might just thrown away what could have been quite a good little strategy choice here. We are going to come out behind Perez. We're going to come out behind Hamilton as well. So down to P6 of this Grand Prix. This was not the strategy that I had in mind. I was hoping we'd come back out in P3, but still, we're going to have much quicker, much fresher rubber than the rest of the field. This isn't over just yet, as long as the safety car comes in the end of this lap. Here we go then, the safety car is coming in at the end of lap 26, so we're going to have 2 laps to try and make the gains that we need to here. I've got no idea why Hamilton isn't matching, or keeping up even, I should say, with the top 3. I remember this was an issue we had back in last season as well here, but we're quite clearly making our intentions well known to Lewis Hamilton that we are going to be trying to fly straight back past him. We've got 2 laps to go here in Shanghai. Are we going to be able to perform the miracle of the restart here? There is our teammate George Russell. There is the only man we're interested in beating this weekend. We have all bunched up, which is good to see. Coming down in towards the final corners. I think George is trying to go for it at the final turn. We're going to have to use all the ERS, boost as much as we can around this circuit. We need to be aggressive down in towards turn 1. We can't afford to let George run away from the rest of the field once again here. Hamilton's first up on the old hit list. Look at the extra grip we've got, though. Up the inside of Perez. One of the most aggressive moves I think I've ever tried to pull off. But wheel-to-wheel contact. Perez had always been expecting it. Ricciardo slips up on the exit, so we'll take that as well. And straight away then, we're back up into P3 of this Grand Prix here. That has been the perfect restart after I thought we'd blundered the strategy call in this race. Bottas and now George Russell, the only 2 cars just in front of us here. But George is trying to break away once again. He's got a 1.6 second gap over ourselves as we head through the S's. We're going to be monitoring that as we've just got a lap and a half to go here from Shanghai. Can we try and get past Bottas down the back straightaway? This could prove absolutely critical as well in our strategy. Are we going to be able to get the run? Yeah, look at that. Bottas really struggling on those hards. He slams the door shut there. I don't think he was quite expecting us to have all the extra grip that we had at our disposal there, but still with the DRS and, without the DRS, with the ERS even, I should say, we're going to be able to go straight around the outside of Valtteri Bottas. He better not try and keep the nose in. No, he just doesn't have anywhere near enough grip on those old hard compounded tyres, which means now, with 1 lap to go, we're back up into P2. We haven't lost out anything from this strategy call, but we got 1.4 seconds to take out of our teammate. New fastest lap of the Grand Prix, despite all the commotion. A 1:30.2. can we get close enough to our teammate George Russell to try and go for something? Last race out, it was a penultimate lap move. Bahrain, it was a final lap move from George Russell on ourselves. Are we going to see another late race dramatic change at the front of the field between these two orange cars? Purple through Sector 1. It's another couple of tenths taken out of George Russell. We need to try and get the run off the exit, though. We're going to have to use all the ERS. We're basically leaving it in rich revs around the entire circuit here. Surely we got extra grip through this section of track over our teammate George Russell. His mediums don't seem to have fallen off just yet, but we are pushing like crazy to try and make something work here. The gap, though, it's not coming down. It's still at 1.5 seconds to our teammate George Russell here as we head out towards the snail section for the final time in this Grand Prix. I don't think we're going to be able to do it. George seems to have found an extra bit of pace in that car there. I've got no idea where on earth he found this sort of pace from on the final lap of the Grand Prix. We're going to take a fair bit out of him as we head down the back straight. We've already got 2.5 over Valtteri Bottas here, but in towards the final corners then of the Chinese Grand Prix. Fair play to George Russell. How on earth he's found that sort of pace on a dead set of medium compound tyres, I will never know. Through the final corner, it's going to be another 1-2 for the team. George sets a 1:30.1. He even took fastest lap off us. What is that from George?
Excellent drive.
There's a few disappointed faces up and down the pit wall after that one, but not here. They secured a phenomenal victory. Tell me, Ant, how do you think they were able to deliver such an incredible result today?
Well, the safety car completely changed the race, didn't it? It's hard to say exactly what would have happened without it, but there's no question that they came out of that situation in a good position.
Well, I'm thoroughly exhausted after the excitement of that race, but I'm sure it's nothing compared to our drivers here. They've worked hard to make it up there, and it's great to see them make their way out onto the podium. And after this round of the World Championship, here's how things look in the drivers' table. Let's focus on the driver of the day, Anthony Davidson. Who do you pick?
I have to give it to Mr. Monaco. There was a lot going on all down the field, but they were the only one who I really felt maximised their potential.
Let's move on to the constructors. The current leaders continue to extend their lead at the top. There was also a strong showing from the Mercedes team today as they make their way up the standings. After an event like that, who knows what the sport has in store for us next time? Be sure to join us again as we continue to bring you the latest excitement in Formula One.
I have got no idea where George Russell found that pace on that final lap. I honestly thought it was going to be a brilliant end to that Grand Prix. We might have been able to try and get something done down into the hairpin right at the end of the lap there. But George, a 1:30.1 on dead medium tyres. That is just insane levels of speed from our teammate. Every other team basically sat in the 32s. You can see Charles Leclerc got a 31.3 in there. But both of us on a low 30 goes to show just how quick this car is at the end of the day. From 4th and 10th on the grid to another 1-2 with the full 44 points. We can't complain as a team, but I'm getting rather worried with just how OP George Russell seems to be at the moment there. Valtteri Bottas up in P3, a good day out by the Finn ahead of Ricciardo and Sergio Perez there. Hamilton all the way down in 6th from 9th on the grid. Danny Kvyat, Esteban Ocon, who seems to ever be consistent, once again getting more points on the board there, with Charles Leclerc and Kimi Raikkonen rounding out the top 10. Stroll from 16th to 11th. Pierre Gasly down in 12th from 5th on the grid there, ahead of both McLarens, who went from 7th and 8th to 13th and 14th there. Verstappen from 2nd on the grid to 15th. It really looked like Ferrari could have done something this weekend, but he basically finished as well. Best of all the people that aren't Haas, Alfa Romeo or Williams, which seem to be the back three at the moment there. Matsushita, Magnussen, King, Giovinazzi and Latifi there, with neither Nick de Vries or Albon making it to the end of the Grand Prix. Means in the Drivers' World Championship, well, George Russell now has a 19-point lead again over myself. 3 wins in the first 4 Grand Prix. It has been a fantastic start to the year for our teammate there. Ocon still sits in P3, 35 points behind ourselves at the moment there, but 8 clear of Daniel Ricciardo. Bottas and Perez move themselves up into 5th and 6th ahead of Sainz, Verstappen and Alexander Albon there, with Charles Leclerc holding on to P10, tied with Danny Kvyat there. Lando Norris down to 12th. Hamilton gets his first points on the board in 13th, ahead of Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly. Raikkonen down in 16th there with Jordan King 17th, and then still Matsushita, both Haas and Williams yet to score. Constructors-wise though, 169 points to Red Bull on 47. Yes, we've got a 122-point lead. We're averaging out, what, 30.5 points a weekend we're pulling out over every other team currently in Formula 1 there. Renault dropped back down to P3. Mercedes jumped McLaren up into 4th there. Ferrari still in 6th ahead of Racing Point and AlphaTauri, with Alfa Romeo on 2, and then obviously Haas re-jumping Williams as best of the 0-point scorers as well there. But thank you all so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, do make sure you get yourselves subscribed. And yeah, we will be back tomorrow for round 5 of the season, where we head to the Dutch Grand Prix. It's never been a good track for us so far this series. Hopefully tomorrow can be a bit different. You guys do not want to miss it. A big thank you to our channel members for making these videos possible. You can be featured in these end clips as well as granted access to some other exclusive perks for just £1 a month by clicking the join button below.